Hi there, this is Jaytech, back with another one of my quick tip videos here for you on Sonic Academy. I hope you're all doing well out there amidst this period of studio lockdown. I know I've been getting a lot more time in to write my next big hits, and hopefully you are too. Today I want to talk to you a little bit about using the principles of vibrating the air and gravity to help get your track to sing out of the speakers more, to be more digestible, more listenable, and more enjoyable for the people who are going to be checking it out. It's something that, I've been ruminating on for many years, especially in the mixing and mastering world. Gravity and the lightness of sound is so much of what we do. And once you can get your head around that perspective, things tend to come together a lot more easily in the studio. Firstly, because you're picking better sounds, and secondly, because you're changing the way that you process those sounds a little bit. So I hope you find this helpful, informative, and enjoyable. And let's dive right in. So something that I think producers either don't realize or really don't think about enough is that the product that we are providing, the medium that we are dealing with, is in fact air. Because without air, there is no sound and there is no music. And all of the music that you write ultimately is being delivered to people's minds over air, over vibrating air. All the frequencies that you play around within your EQ spectrum, it's all changing the way that the air is being vibrated as it comes out of the speakers or out of the headphones into people's ear canals. And so in this video, I want to sort of meditate on that a little bit, and I want to show you some ways that you can basically, manipulate these airwaves, make your track lighter than air so that it can, in a sense, defy gravity. And in the process, your track then can actually gain its own gravity. It can have a gravity which attracts the listeners to it. So it is all about listenability. It's all about digestibility, and it's about, sending the right airwaves to your listeners' eardrums. I have spent so many years taking tracks out of the studio and bringing them to big sound systems at festivals, and experiencing how the bass line that I made translated to a big system, and if it was shaking the subs, and if people are feeling it, and there's this visceral feeling of the music is processed by your mind, by your brain, but it's also felt by your body. And this all boils down to the principles of gravity and vibration of air. And it's the same science that, makes your pianos and vocals fill a room with a pleasing resonance, or, having a massive sounding record coming out of a pair of laptop speakers or a phone, and that musical message still getting across and the listener still getting that enjoyment out of it. The best sounds are the ones that just travel through the air and around the world to your listeners' ears with ease. And they tend to sing out over the rest of the mix with minimal processing involved. But what a lot of producers early on in their careers do is they tend to lean towards sounds that are really heavy and are dragging the mix down. And in the process, you spend a lot of time and a lot of energy fighting with these sounds in order to make them play nicely with the rest of the mix. So when we think consciously about the principles of gravity and vibration of air in our sound selection, we tend to pick sounds that sing out over everything and fill the room more easily. And along the way, the amount of surgery required to get the mix sounding right when you finish the song greatly decreases. Ultimately, it's about picking sounds that are going to work for you rather than sounds that you have to do battle with in order to get sounding right. And the resulting record will have a greater lightness, which will allow it to travel further out into the world and reach more listeners. In his book, Mixing with Your Mind, Michael Stavrou talks about holding a set of keys in his hand sometimes while he's making critical mix decisions, and when he changes something, sort of gauging whether things suddenly feel heavier or lighter. And that's a good way to think about it, I think. So I have a dummy project here, which I've created to sort of demonstrate the difference between a musical motif that has been created with a sense of gravity in mind versus the same idea where the sounds are a bit heavier, a bit dumpier, and are going to be more sort of likely to repel the listener rather than attract them. So these four sounds here are inspired by X-Mag. They're like a guitar-driven electronic funk band, very cool. Check them out. And I've sort of, I've done something in the style of what they would do. I've created some chords here. I've got a kick pattern, I've got a snare pattern, and I've got a sub bass. These sounds are designed to be a little bit cheap and sort of demonstrate what I don't want you to be doing with your sounds. So this is what that sounds like. So, a lot of these sounds are kind of, a lot of, I think, up and coming producers, a lot of the demos we get, the sounds do sound a little bit like this. And so, let's firstly look at why these don't work so well from a gravity perspective. So, I'm going to load up this EQ on this kick here. And I chose this kick specifically because it's really trying too hard around this sort of area here. It's got this that you really kind of want to avoid unless you're doing a certain kind of music that actually likes that like hard style or whatever, So not to blow your ears off there, but you can sort of see that this has got some really sort of like painful sort of sounding frequencies that are actually gonna push your listener away. So what I want you to think about is, looking at this EQ plugin, just imagine for a second that this is like a bird's eye view of a river, and you're looking like from the top down at a river, and that's the left bank of the river, and that's the right bank of the river. And the audio is sort of flowing through from the south to the north, like water in a stream. And that's kind of what is really happening is the sound is flowing through this EQ plugin into the master, and then out to your listeners and into their minds and so forth. And so what we actually find is that between this bass side of the river and this treble side of the river, there are certain it's not a completely linear flow for each sound. In fact, the best way to think about it is it's like there are rocks in the river. And so, there are places where the sound wants to flow around. And so this is sort of like a rock in that river. If I just solo that. It just kind of hurts a little bit. And it's heavy and it drags things down. And looking at these chords, there's this sort of... that just kind of hurts to my ears, and it's like a part of the river where the sound doesn't want to flow through. The sound would rather flow, it's sort of like it's a bit happier there. So you feel how you can sort of turn that up and it doesn't hurt. If anything, it actually gives like a little bit more body and a little bit more fullness. So the difference between a sound that just totally isn't going to sing out of the speakers and one that will is that the sounds that naturally want to sing out of the speakers tend to like being turned up more. There are more places you can turn them up in the frequency spectrum. Generally, a good sound, a good indicator of when a sound needs to be replaced is when there's nothing good to say about it, and there's nowhere in the frequency spectrum where it actually likes to shine through. So let's just hear that one more time. This 200 hertz. It's kind of nice and warm versus that sort of harshness. So what we're looking for is sounds that just sort of have that ease and sort of shine through without me having to make excuses for them, without me having to apologize for them by pulling away the things that are really just crappy sort of characteristics of the sound. So let's now listen to the same motif with a bunch of unprocessed sounds, that are sort of hand-picked to have that gravity and to flow through at the right places without even trying. Let's hear this now. Let's look at this sub. This is a new sub bass. So if you, especially if you're listening on speakers right now, you can sort of, there's like a cleanliness to that, there's a butteriness to it, there's a warmth, and there's this feeling of it just magically fills the room without you having to do anything. So that is the sound selection. It's finding sounds that actually move that air. And with clean, high quality sounds, there you have more options of what you can sort of turn up for creative effect. There's just a much nicer body and tone to the sound. And so already, there's so much less that I would need to do to make this work, as opposed to this. The snare, it's trying too hard around here. So what you'll find is that there are certain frequencies that come up again and again, where sounds do like to sound warm and full, and they tend to be sort of actually, marked on EQ plugins quite a lot. So you'll sort of see, like 100 hertz. This is not such a good example because there's only a few, but it's generally sort of like, 50, 100, 200, 400, 1K. There are certain frequencies where things like to hit again and again. So, what I want you to think about is, where does this sound like to shine through, and where is its center of gravity? So like looking at this sub again, on the nicer end, where does this sub like to shine through? And maybe these frequencies don't necessarily need to be turned up, but you can sort of identify where it sits. And sometimes I even will label a sound. I'll be like, this is okay. This is roughly a 50 hertz sub. Like this is where on the sound stage of the frequency spectrum, this is where this sound likes to flow through in the river, so to speak. And so identifying that, it lets you identify like what characteristics of the sound actually want to sing out, and which ones are holding the sound back. So that covers picking sounds for gravity and for positive vibration. Now let's look at processing sounds. So with EQ, let's go to these chords here these gravity chords. Something that I like to do to really just sort of like make things jump out of the speakers a little bit more is bump the sound up just a little bit higher above the mix, and then listen for what is holding this sound back. What is holding this sound back from being pleasant to listen to when it's being amplified a bit above where it was in the mix. When it's being brought out more, what characteristic of the sound is actually pushing you away rather than inviting you in. So let's have a listen. So that's a little bit uncomfortable to listen to now because it's sort of a bit too far out in front of the mix. So I've instantly just made it a bit less confronting to listen to, a little bit less intense and in your face by pulling back, just identifying that frequency. And that's by listening for it. It's like listening for what frequency is dragging things down here. So let's listen to just that simple bump up with a little EQ adjustment. Listen to how that brings the sound, makes the sound jump out of the speakers a bit more compared to where it was. That's the before. You can increase visibility by pumping up, a little bit of high end on the sounds. So usually, I'm firstly asking what is dragging the sound down, and then where might something like to shine through. And that second part of turning things up, that's more for creative effect. It's your own personal taste if you want to do it or not. That 100 hertz is nice, and I think some of this treble is quite nice too. So we've increased the gravity of this sound by bringing out or flowing the energy more into the frequencies where it likes to shine through, and flowing that river once again away from the areas where it doesn't. And that's the best way to do that. The other way you can help things fill the room and sing out of the speakers a bit more is with spatial effects. And really, it's just a case of a bit of reverb going a long way here. Say for example, this snare. If I'm dialing in the reverb settings, specifically thinking about trying to fill the sound space a bit more. So I've just put a bit of a reverb on there. That's the dry, the reverb, and the wet. And so I've filled a bit more of the space there. So you can see that employing the principles of gravity in music is really about emanating maximum vibrational energy with minimal fuss and minimal effort. And it's always about striking a balance between those two things and maximizing the energy potential of your track while pulling back on the things that might be holding it back. In the next video, I'm going to talk to you about employing pressure in your music for maximum impact. So stay tuned for that.
Thanks everybody for watching, commenting, and indeed liking. We really do appreciate all the support we get here on our Sonic Academy YouTube channel. So if you found this video super useful, please, we'd love you to hit the subscribe button. We update the YouTube channel every week with new content. And if you want to watch some more relevant content, just click on the videos beside me.